This Choircast podcast is brought to you by the Quantum Sayings of Jesus, Decoding the Lost Gospel of Thomas by Keith Giles, available now on Amazon in Kindle and paperback. Buried around 340 AD, unearthed in 1945, and translated into English in 1959, the Gospel of Thomas has been studied, debated, and analyzed by dozens of scholars and historians searching for clues about the meaning of these cryptic sayings of Jesus. In the Quantum Sayings of Jesus, author Keith Giles offers a look at the text from the perspective of non-duality and divine oneness. Check it out on Amazon today.
Welcome to the Unbelief Podcast, your journey, actually our journey together beyond inherited beliefs to a spirituality that works for you. I'm your host, Jeremy. I'm a deep skeptic, also a pastor. We can fix that later, right? No? All right, welcome to the Unbelief Podcast. I am Jeremy.
And I'm Gabie. And Jeremy, I think there's something you want to talk about that's referring to Easter and the term that's used.
Yeah. I have a soapbox. It really bothers me. During my last, I don't know, it started kind of in the middle of my time working in evangelical churches. And I say evangelical because it was a mainline denomination, but it was in the deep South. And so even mainline denominations sometimes are really, really evangelical, which is these churches. And there was this push to rename Easter Resurrection Sunday.
Oh, okay.
Right. So have you heard of this?
Actually, I have. I feel like this was something that was said in my apostolic church, that it's Resurrection Sunday. People would flop between the two terms. Yeah.
Well, and we stopped. We did mailings and stuff like that, and we stopped calling it Easter. We called it Resurrection Sunday, and it was a whole thing. And the first time it started was because I had this. Worked in this church with the senior pastor, and the wife was also employed by the church. Which is. Hashtag nepotism, hashtag
right.
The worst thing, right? Because technically, as far as it was concerned in the structure, he wasn't her supervisor. Somebody else was her supervisor, but that doesn't matter, right?
Yeah.
She sleeps with the boss.
Right.
And she got this thing about it was Resurrection Sunday and wouldn't get off of it. And we were all... the staff was not a huge fan of her and the way she sort of would push these weird agendas. One time they recreated the tabernacle in a big circus tent kind of thing out in the front of the church.
Yeah.
Which, fine, but she said that the Lord told her it had to be open 24 hours a day for weeks. So we had to staff it. We had to sleep there. Yeah. Anyway, it was crazy. I digress. She got Resurrection Sunday in her head. And have you ever experienced that dynamic, the pastor's wife thing on staff?
I don't think so, because I think my church probably operated a bit differently. The wife kind of was taking care of the kids, and we didn't really see her much.
Okay.
Yeah, and so we knew she was it's not called first lady. What is it called?
Some cultures call it first lady.
Yeah, so she was called the first lady. I'm gonna say I think that's what the term was used.
Yeah.
But no, we wouldn't really. At least my church in Ohio.
Right.
The wife at my church in New York was involved in the worship team, so she was more around and accessible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The craziest story about this, they were doing this series on love. And I can't remember why. I don't remember the metaphor, but we had this worship planning meeting every week to talk about, what was happening in worship, all that kind of stuff. She comes in and she's had this great idea that there was this balcony that was really just used to access lights that were up high, that looked over where the stage was. So the stage was in the front of the room, balconies in the back of the room. And the idea was we were going to have this heart on the stage, and somebody was going to take an actual hunting bow on the balcony and shoot the heart that was on the stage, right? And we were like, this can't happen. Like the pastor's gonna. What if he gets shot through the heart?
Oh my
like,
gosh.
what if the guy trips and or the arrow? I don't shoot animals.
Right.
Like, I don't know. But they were like, she was like, no, we'll get somebody who's really good. And I was like, yeah, but something could go wrong. And like, if something could go wrong on the time when you had people waving red fabric over everybody's head, like somebody just got annoyed. If something goes wrong here, somebody dies.
Right. I love church loves to include these theatrics, especially during holidays. And it's like, let's calm down for a minute.
I'm sorry. Is this just a therapy session mostly for me?
No. I don't mean you. I meant like the theatrics that occur.
It.
Yeah.
I'm just sitting here dumping all these stories. Okay, so back to Resurrection Sunday. So we were able to say like, this is too dangerous. We got the church's person who is obsessed with liability and insurance to like cut it off. But Resurrection Sunday we couldn't do because she wanted it, and that's what just happens. If she wants it, it goes. And so the cars went out Resurrection Sunday. And like part of it is like people are like, what if you don't go to church? Right?
Yeah.
You know what Easter is.
Right.
Who the hell knows what Resurrection Sunday is?
Yeah, I guess within the Christian community, we understand what that means.
Right.
And I also feel like the reason to have this distinction, I was just thinking about this and reflecting on it, probably because Christians love to separate themselves from the world, right? Because Easter is like, oh, the atheists will go celebrate eggs and the Easter bunny, and that's not what Easter's about, right? So let's call it Resurrection Sunday to then remind ourselves it's about Jesus and his resurrection. So.
Right. And there's like pagan roots to the word. So,
as there is to every other holiday that we celebrate within the community, but okay, yes.
So, and you are a person who studies words for a living.
Yes.
So for people who are not aware of this resource, can you describe succinctly, because you are a professor, could you describe what the Oxford English Dictionary is? OED.
Oh, you're right. The dictionary to me is, I believe it's professors and scholars who decide, who basically are monitoring the language and decide what words are basically recognized as official words. And I put this in quotation because now we're talking about standardization of language, right? And so from a standard point of view, these are words that are considered real, acceptable, and and like every year they add some words. Every year, yes, words get added. And it's a constant filtering of what words, if meanings change, words have to get redefined. And so, And one of the things I love about the Oxford English Dictionary, because I'm a nerd, is that you look up, it's got the definitions, but it also shows you where the word has been used historically, and how it has been used, and so if you look up Easter in the OED, which I know that you have done many times, as everybody has, you'll find that like the first usage comes from this guy named the Venerable Saint Bede in like the 8th century, and he says that the term, and it was like Easter month, comes from a goddess named Estra, and there was a festival that was like a springtime festival that celebrated her and life and fertility and hope and all of that stuff, and that as the Christians sort of came into the area, so this is not him, but the idea then is that as the Christians come into the area, they begin to adopt that word and some of those practices. I need to pop in here for just a second and fact check myself. Some of this information, actually, I found out later from the Blessed Dan McClellan, biblical scholar extraordinaire, was not 100% accurate. So let me just give you a heads up. The Christian practices around eggs and bunnies
have nothing to do with this festival, of this pagan festival. The eggs actually come from their tradition of breaking the fast after Lent, and they'd actually paint them like yellow for joy and red for the blood of Jesus, etc. They'd trade the eggs, so that's pretty cool. There's also a rabbit that would have a litter, and then way too soon for it to actually have worked, they could have another litter. And so the rabbit was a symbol of the virgin birth. But those things actually come from the just sort of emerge in the Germanic part, and are like from the beginning part of Easter. Now, eggs are used in other parts of the world, and when I talk about that in just a second, yes, that is accurate. As is the etymology of the word Easter itself, even though most of the world actually doesn't use Easter, they use some version of the word Passover. All right, now back to the part of the podcast where we get to listen to me be wrong. Now, the other thing I think is like spring festivals. Right, the spring equinox, every religion has these, and every pagan tradition has these, and they all are the same because it's celebrating what's happening in spring, right?
Right. Mm.
Like new life, hope. Also, always fertility, because the winter months, people are snuggling a lot.
Right.
And by the time spring gets here, we can tell that they were snuggling.
Right.
Which is where like the bunny comes from.
Oh, really?
Because bunnies mate like bunnies. So they're a symbol of fertility.
Okay, yeah.
And then the eggs are a symbol of like hope and new life. Like the potential.
Right.
You know, like the buds on the trees.
I've never thought about this.
Yes.
This is crazy. Yeah.
Right. It's so like, and like, it really, wherever you go, you'll find those kinds of symbols, and often those symbols, like if there aren't bunnies around, then it's not bunnies, but like, or eggs, but there's eggs everywhere. So like, you'll find those in all these different places.
Yeah.
Right. Which I think is like beautiful in a way, because Easter is celebrating death and resurrection, right? Which is spring. Like that's what that is. And every springtide religious festival is celebrating the same thing. There's nothing unique about the celebration, the sort of undergirding things about the celebration. However, having been in an evangelical church and hearing the pagan roots, what's going to happen when people find out about that, right?
Yeah, I think they will probably look past it and move on, right? What are they going to do with that? They'll be like, this isn't true, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, I think what you're saying...
they'll get up in arms and be like, this is where resurrection... They're like, well, we can't use Easter.
Right.
We're calling on another god.
Oh, man. I mean, yeah, I think out of all the holidays, Easter at least has the most priority, or at least was prioritized most in my church. And why, like you said, it celebrates death and life. People were fiending to get baptized on Easter weekend. Like I remember that being like a big thing. Like, I have to do it on Easter weekend. And I'm like, okay.
Which is also kind of funny because it feels like a little witchy, right? This idea there's some sort of magic about that day.
Right. It's quite a lot that was going on, but yeah, I think it's very much, I remember I would spend all of Good Friday in church. Like I would go, because we had an open prayer room that I loved going to. And so I would be at church from like 7 to midnight, just reading the 4 Gospels. And just, yeah. And so it was a big deal to be like saturating yourself and like being with God. And then on Sunday, you at church all day. I mean, my church services were like 4 hours long. I don't know, but yeah, but very much typical Pentecostal.
No, for sure. I remember being invited to guest speak at a church like that, and
oh no,
I went, and they had like an hour of music. Then I got up, and I had a half-hour sermon. So I did my half-hour sermon, and the pastor was looking at me like, "And what else are you gonna do?" And I was like, "Amen." And the pastor gets up, preaches for another hour.
Yeah.
And then we have an hour more of music.
Yeah. Yeah, it's wild. That would take up my entire Sunday. Oh man. Yeah, that's yeah.
Right. So, yeah, I feel like, okay, so can we just talk about language in general?
Absolutely.
As a linguist, I mean, like,
yes.
Tell me about, so like, this is an example, this Easter example of a word sort of changing its association. Like, early, it was referring to this pagan festival. And by now, like, nobody, okay, not nobody, probably some people on TikTok, like, are using it to mean something else. But in general, it means something completely different to everybody.
Yeah.
Like, how does that happen?
I mean, yeah, I feel like, it's very obvious, and any generative linguist who wants to say that language don't change meaning is incorrect, right? I mean, we see this in everyday life where words in languages undergo changes of meaning. I mean, the most, I would say, obvious example is the word, or maybe people don't know this, the word gay, right? Before it was used to mean something happy, joyful. Now it refers to someone part of the LGBT community.
Right.
And so,
which I love, by the way, just as an aside, because there's this other idea called queer joy, where when queer people find each other, there's this like comfort and release and happiness.
Yeah.
Anyway, go ahead.
No, but yeah, I was going to say words very much like the meaning depends on contextual use, because languages always needs to be looked at in the context in which it's used. And so words in the same way can acquire associations, different meanings. And an example of this, I'm going to just show, because this is not obviously something that's isolated only to English, but to different languages. So if you guys know, favelas in Portuguese refers to the community and where it's very low income, poverty.
Well, I'm sure that all of the podcast listeners are fluent in Portuguese.
Right. I wanted to explain in case you don't know. So the word favelado.
I'm sorry, I'm just a smart ass.
No, you're totally fine. No, but this is why I would try to give context, right? So the word favelado in Portuguese.
Favela?
Favelado. Which literally means, favelado. Favelado. It literally means someone who lives in the slums, right? Like it's someone who lives in that area. But
like
now
a slum dweller.
A slum dweller, pretty much. Yeah. But now it's acquired negative connotations that now is associated to someone who's poor, like who doesn't have income, like all these different negative connotations. Yeah. It doesn't literally just mean its semantic meaning, it has pragmatic meaning now too.
Okay. So those are two other linguist terms.
Yeah, sorry.
What's semantic, what's pragmatic?
Semantic in simple forms, it's literal meaning of a word.
Right.
Versus pragmatic meaning is its social meaning. And so with phrases like I'm so hungry I could eat a horse, like literally we don't mean that, but pragmatically we just mean we're starving, you know? And so yes, words acquire these semantic and pragmatic meanings. And another example of this, because I actually did a whole paper on, like I looked at words in Dominican dialects and had people like rate them and whatnot. But an example is there is this word called tongzi. This is actually in Mandarin.
Tongzi?
Yes.
With a G?
Yes, it has a G
tongzi.
in it. It's TONGHZI.
Tongzi.
I think I'm pronouncing.
So it's like a soft G, I guess is what the GH is supposed to. I'm sorry.
Maybe. No, yeah. I'm not a fluent Mandarin speaker, so this is the way I'm reading it.
Mandarin.
This is from Mandarin.
Okay.
So the reason why I bring up this word is to show words change meaning. This word used to mean comrade. And what ended up happening was this linguist went to a conference in China and they were talking about the LGBT community. And it wasn't favorable at the time. Like this was something very taboo. And so this person ended up reporting on the conference. And so now this word tongzi, which meant comrade, acquired negative connotations towards the LGBT community in China.
And I'm sorry, I didn't catch the connection. So the person went to the thing in China and used the term tongzi to describe LGBTQ people,
pretty
in their
much.
Presentation.
Yes, and so because his art,
and he was saying like they are our comrades.
Yes, but because like he was reporting on a topic that was so taboo, then now this word, because his report was pretty negative of this conference that was just talking about the LGBT community, it now acquired like negative connotations to refer to people, the LGBT community.
So it's like a slur?
Pretty much, yeah. Okay. So it went from being something positive, comrade, to now right? In the same way, kind of gay has changed meaning, the
Right.
favelado has changed meaning. So all that to say is that words are very much used in context and do change.
Yeah, I remember
meaning.
encountering this growing up. So I grew up in the Deep South, and I remember my grandfather would use the term Negro and to refer to black people.
Yeah.
And when he said it around me, I said, Grandpa, you can't. It's not okay. Like, and he said that that he's like, well, no, that's what they want people to call them. And I was like, that's not. And but it turns out he was right in a sense, in that there was a moment in which they African American community was reclaiming that word and was using it in a positive way, and then it shifted, right?
Yeah, because meanings shift. I mean, words can mean something literally, but then with social use, it can begin to acquire different meaning. In the same way, like I'm thinking of something similar, and I don't like using this word, but for the sake of learning, the word retarded, right, used to refer to people that had disabilities, but now it's very much a slur in some sense, right? I would not use that to talk about someone like that. And so words do acquire different connotations, associations,
which
over
of course
time.
makes me think of Michael Scott. That's the only thing that comes up in my brain now when I hear that word. So okay, so then back to Easter. So can you connect these two? Like, what happens, semantic and pragmatic, and like tracing that story from the festival to today?
Oh man. I wish I knew a little more about history, because I feel like that would help me answer this question a bit more.
So is it a semantic and pragmatic meaning that changed from, this is talking about this festival that is related to this God, to how we use it today? Like, what is that?
If Easter was referring to a festival that was related to a God, and now it's referring to, in the Christian realm, right, the resurrection of Jesus, then I think this word has over time taken a new, a literal meaning, a new semantic meaning.
Right.
And pragmatic's not really, because I think when we refer to Easter now, people have a general understanding that it's a
religious festival,
a religious holiday that's celebrated within the Protestant, Protestant movement, or Catholic, Christianity and as a whole.
Right.
And so, this word has just acquired a new meaning. Yeah.
And like all of this conversation, it's like begging me to keep going with the words and talk about the King James version.
Oh yeah.
So I'm a nerd about King James version because it's horrible. Do you know much about that and like the King James version and all of that piece? Because I can fill in details of that just because I'm the Bible religion nerd on this podcast.
Right. I mean, from my understanding of King James, I haven't done too much look into like a historical view, because I'm still, as anyone listened to my last podcast, still very much in my deconstruction. But I know that the King James is there are some translations I remember that are word to word versus thought to thought, right? And so I know that NIV is NIV and ESV. I forget which one is which, actually. Do you know?
And those are really similar. And those also have this really interesting conservative agenda in their translation, because they shift some of the translations so that the Bible seems univocal to make it agree with itself,
right,
when it doesn't.
Right.
King James is interesting to me, though, because a lot of people think that the King James is more accurate
because it's a word-for-word translation. I think that's why, right?
Yes,
or people say it is.
Kind of.
Right.
And, it is in a really awkward way, but also people think that because it's older. Right? They think like it's closer in time to Jesus, so it has to be more accurate. But we've discovered a lot more manuscripts since then that make our understanding of the text a lot more clear.
Yeah.
But the other thing with King James, it's really closer. It's more accurate to say that it is a revision of something called the Bishop's Bible.
Yes.
So when the King James Bible came out, the most popular Bible translation was called the Bishop's Bible. King James didn't like it for a number of reasons. One of them was because it was a little bit more accurate in the sense that it was like there were moments where it was anti-monarchy, and it used words that were more accurate to describe early church stuff, and not words that were the words they used to describe the Anglican Church and its structure, right? So he gave the translator some rules of what needed to be changed, and it needed to not be anti-monarchy, and it needed to, when there was words used about church, it needed to have the words used about that the Anglican Church used.
Yeah.
And the other thing they did that was really weird is that they took the word order from Hebrew and Greek and translated the words in that order.
Oh, that is very problematic.
Right. Okay. So explain why that's problematic. Give us a normal modern day explanation of that.
Okay. Not every language is syntactically, which means the sentence structure, constructed the same, right? I mean, I'm just, okay. For example, English very much is a subject, verb, object language, right? So we have the subject, right? I went to the store. Mm-hmm. For example, Hindi doesn't work that way. Okay. Hindi is subject, Hindi? Object, verb. So you cannot take the syntax from another language and then apply it to, it's not going to make any sense, right? Because the languages aren't working the same way.
So give us a Hindi.
For example, you would say, if it's subject, object, verb, it'd be like, the store went. That's how it translates for us. Right. That doesn't quite make sense for our language, right? No.
What about in Spanish? Because I know it's not exactly the same, but there are weird things.
Yeah. So
in Spanish too, right?
Spanish is subject, verb, object as well.
Right.
However, things work differently, like adjectives, right? We have the blue house. Adjectives come before the noun, but in Spanish it's the opposite, right? So, the noun comes first, then the adjective. You'd say la casa azul or la casa blanca. So it'd be the noun first, then the adjective. In English,
so the house blue.
Right.
Which doesn't make sense.
Quite doesn't make sense, right?
If I say I'm going to go to the house blue,
right.
It sounds like, when I hear that, it sounds like there's a place called the house blue. It's like a proper noun.
Right. Which is why when you said that, I'm like, oh, wow, that is very problematic, because that doesn't make sense to the user of whatever language you're currently speaking or understand, right?
And so that is really problematic. And it's when the King James Version came out, it was one of the biggest things that people hated about it is they said it is hard to understand, which is funny because that's what we complain about now. Right. It's hard to understand. It was never easy to understand because people said nobody talks like this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's a weird thing about it. And then so they did that, but what was really interesting is King James wanted it to be the official most popular Bible. It was not. People hated it.
Yeah.
And so what did he do? He outlawed the Bishop's Bible. And so when the Bishop's Bible was gone, the King James became more popular. But eventually, it completely fell out of favor for a long, long time. It wasn't until the Great Awakenings again that it comes back into favor. And I have my own theories about that because it's easier to control people and to be the source of truth, that for me to be the source of truth when you were using a text that is not easily understood.
Right.
And so when I use when I'm reading from the King James and I say, this is what it means, they can't understand what it means, right? Okay, so I'm going to give you this little example from the King James, and I'm going to kind of walk you through it, and I want you to tell me, like, what is happening here linguistically.
Okay.
Okay, so Jude, verse 22. Jude only has one chapter.
Right.
It says, in the King James Version, it says, but of some have compassion, making a difference. Okay? Of some have compassion, making a difference. You can already see the weird sentence structure.
Right.
Right? But this term, making a difference, right? When we hear that, it's a modern idiom, right?
Right.
What does making a difference mean?
Right. Making some sort of impact that is recognized by people, something that's different.
Right.
Yeah.
So that idea, that idiom actually doesn't come into usage until the 1900s.
Okay.
Right. So in the King James time, making a difference was actually like literally making a difference, like a distinction.
Okay.
Right. Between the two. So like if we just fix that part of this problem.
Right.
But of some have compassion, making a difference. Right. It would mean, but it would mean like have compassion on some, but also make a difference, like make a distinction between who you're having compassion on and not.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Right.
Would not have, from that passage, I wouldn't have, without you breaking it down, understanding the context of today, that went right over my head.
Right. No, of course. Right. And you are, let's just be clear, you are a linguist.
Right.
Right. You're not a person unfamiliar with the word.
Right.
Okay. So then this is the other problem.
Yeah.
There's also a mistranslation.
Wonderful.
Because it was based on outdated manuscripts. Right. So the Greek word is actually changes the object of the word compassion. Okay. So it's usually rendered something like, now have compassion on those who are making a difference, those who are doubting. Right?
Oh, wow. Yeah. Yeah. We're getting all sorts of different meanings from one.
Right.
Yeah. From one sentence. Right. And so I was just thinking while you were giving me all these different understandings, right? When you understand context, like this is why I'm like, I think a fundamentalist view of the Bible is problematic.
Yeah, of course.
You know, because words that were said back then, like written however many years ago, language is constantly evolving. Like we would have to relook at scripture and what it means for our context today. Right. And so, this is crazy. And I'm sure there's so much of this I'm sure that King James has
it's
a plethora of issues. I can't imagine even more modern ones today, right? And people have issues with the more modern. People don't like the message. They don't like new translations that have come out, but they don't understand that we are evolving as a society. So therefore, words are not going to mean the same thing they did back then.
Right. And like, so in your work, is there the same thing, or do you have like translate, like just even translating, like I've got this book of poetry by Pablo Neruda, I think.
Yes,
is that
I
right?
love him. Yes, Pablo Neruda. Yeah,
and he writes in Spanish.
Yes,
but there's an English translation of poetry, which is difficult. But they're side by side.
Yeah,
and like I'm curious about that. Even like when I've read those poems, the whole time I'm reading in English, I'm like, I wish I knew Spanish better because I'm wondering how. And like I had a friend who was reading Spanish, and one of the words was like monster in Spanish, but it was not translated as that because like it's poetry. So like, yeah.
So I was gonna say. Now, remembering the NIV is a thought for thought translation and why I preferred it when I was the upcoming linguist in me, right? Because you cannot translate word for word, especially if we're going across languages now.
Yeah.
Because they're not going to mean the same thing. There's idioms in Spanish that I could not possibly explain in English. Like
Right.
it's depending on the context.
Is there one that comes to mind? I'd love to.
Oh shoot. Like I'll give you an example of like maybe like a slang phrase that's used
perfect.
in my Dominican dialect, right?
Okay.
So we would say like estoy en olla to say that you're broke, which literally means you are in, like, you know those big pots they use in Hispanic culture? They're like the silver pots and they always make stews in them.
Yeah.
It literally means I'm in that pot, like at the bottom of the pot. And so if I say, oh, I'm in the bottom of the pot to somebody,
You're like, no, that.
they'd be like, what are you saying? Right. And so again, the context of understanding what that means in Spanish, like and especially in Dominican Spanish, this is not across dialects, someone probably wouldn't understand me. Right. So even something so contextualized to a specific variety.
So like from Dominican Spanish to Mexican Spanish.
No, if I said this phrase, I don't think they would. I mean, with context, maybe if I was talking, but just the phrase itself, if you're not familiar with my dialect, you're not going to know what that means.
That's so interesting. So sometimes even dialect to dialect.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have that in English too.
Right.
I mean,
which is interesting to me because when we talk about translations, one of the things that can make biblical translations particularly difficult is that some words we have like 2 occurrences of them anywhere.
Right.
And so it's context. It's like, what is this? And there's not some sort of dictionary that you can consult from. I mean, maybe there was in the Library of Alexandria, but of course we don't have that anymore.
Right.
But you know, there's not a dictionary that you can just look up from, you know, the 1st century. And so it's some words are just best guesses.
Yeah.
I mean, smart people have made really good guesses, but they're still.
Yeah, we don't possibly know, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's what historians do. They take context of what text was available and try their best to, you know, with research and their knowledge, piece together what meaning could have meant according to other passages. But you can't possibly know with all the evolution that has happened with changing meaning of language. Like it's, yeah.
All right. So this podcast coming out on Easter Sunday.
Right.
Easter Sunday. My vote is to stay with Easter for 2 reasons. 1, everybody knows what it means.
Yeah.
2, there's like a cool history to it and it connects us to something deeper. What I mean, like, what's your feeling? Easter or Resurrection Sunday?
I'm going with Easter here. Yeah.
All right. Okay. So thank you so much for listening to the Unbelief podcast. Gabie and I are both part of our Not Church community. If you want to be part of it, it's really great. It's like a place where people who want to nerd out on stuff like this and not be concerned with people telling them they're going to hell because of it. Right?
Period. Yes.
Yeah, and that's great. The way you do it is $3 a month. It's $3 a month because we're not going to ask you for 10% of your income. It's pay for what you get. So you can go to patreon.com/skepticpastor. It's patreon.com/skepticpastor. And if you are listening to this anywhere, you can give us a review. Reviews really, really, really do matter. All the stars and the even extra. And I know this is asking a lot, but if you can write some text, that would be great. That's it. That's the podcast. Shout out to the Choir Network, to Patheos, to Matthew and Keith, who make everything happen. Now, get out of here. Go do something to make the world a better place. Okay? We'll see you next time.